we have to keep working with it for a while yet until we can migrate off because we got people using the software. Uh, we can do a REST API. If we can come up with uh, some ways that we want to exchange information, that would be pretty easy. Um, and one of the aspects of what we did is we have a minimal model for uh, uh, um, economic networks. It's 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 almost totally minimal in the sense that there's maybe a couple of things we could collapse, but basically it is uh, in order to do economic networks, you need all of these concepts and relationships. If you're missing anything, you can't do it. You're missing something. Uh, One of the places that I'm not going to suggest that we go into that in any great detail now. If anybody's, the questions here are: is anybody else interested in economic networks? And how deep do you want to get into it? And when do you want to get deep into it? And all that kind of stuff. Um, a couple of places that are sort of interesting from a linked open data standpoint, and even more so if you actually want to do tiny apps, uh, is recipes, which by that I don't mean just recipes for baking cookies. I mean recipes for as instructions for doing almost anything, documenting how you do things. And recipes can be shared, and recipes can extend across many networks. In other words, you could have a recipe that spans the whole internet. It's like we are all connected and we are all doing this thing, and we're sharing this idea of how to do something. And we got people that are thinking on that level that we may actually do something with concretely. Be talking to them later today. Those are some aspects of it. Lynn has been focusing a lot on the person and organization level, and so I'll let her talk about that.
Okay, so I'm focusing a lot is an exaggeration, but mostly I wanted to just basically raise the question of how do we proceed on figuring this stuff out. And I was going to kind of go through an example in the org model where, like, when we had this discussion with Simon and Mikey of Inspiral, because as we mentioned with Tibor earlier, they're working on like a person app and an org app. And so we said, well, great, shoot, we'd love to be able to, because we know we have a requirement for networks of networks. And one instance of our software is right now kind of either one network or a set of associated networks. So we're going to have to link across instances. So we know we need a protocol. We know we need a way for people to trade and do whatever. And what we ran into looking at the thing they chose, and maybe I should just link this guy in, is that it was very enterprise focused, and like it didn't have quite what we needed. And this is just a really simple example, and I know there are way more complicated and more difficult examples coming up for us, and Elf, we had this discussion a little bit right in that thread. So let's see, do I have my link somewhere? I'll try to put it up here. This is just really brief. So I was going to just kind of go through this in detail, but basically what you can see on this is like, here's the W3C standard. It's kind of a set of stuff put together, really. And a lot of this works really well for us. But what doesn't work for us well, on page 2, this is like our simple model that Bob was referencing. And on the right side, we have a little person and organization piece. We have people and organizations bundled into agent, which is also in the W3C set of models. But what the W3C model doesn't have is like this fairly free-flowing, or it's not free-flowing, but it needs to support lots of user definitions in the way that organizations relate to each other and organizations relate to people, etc. Um, so we didn't know how to resolve that, like it goes against the grain to write a new standard or something. On the other hand, the focus of so many of the existing standards is not networked and not, it's your standard corporate model, basically. So that's mostly just, it's like to raise the question. I'd love for us to kind of sit and figure out how do we pursue some of these questions. What do we want to use of existing standards? Is it okay if we start building either additions to that or something different? Who wants to work on it? How does it fit into kind of all of our individual projects? So that was it. I just am interested in getting the topic on the table.
So I'd like to focus now on the critique of existing networked organization models that are represented in the W3C spec, for example, and work that I did in terms of these temporary architecture interventions in urban space.
Mm-hmm.
So back in 2012, it started with the public space invaders, where we tried to do exactly this, to map organizations, people, and projects, and the idea was to go towards mapping knowledge that comes inside, is carried by certain people, and by mutual exchange passes over to other people. And when Thomas from WeShare Berlin got me in contact with ELF, I also had this one, Bob, you said epiphanic moment that just came to me, that with our mapping of mappings, which is exactly like the networking the networks question, we are also kind of building an algorithmic representation of the economic flows within alternative networked environments. And I'm taking many ideas out of the organized networks theory from Ned Rossiter, who works together with Gert Lovink from Institute for Network Cultures in Amsterdam. And Pavlik, you might want to visit them if they have time for you when you're in Amsterdam. The Institute for Network Cultures. Ned Rossiter is from Australia, but Gert Lovink should be aware of stuff going on in the scene. And my question is now, how can we as MMM focus only on the mapping questions while relying on standardized schemas for representing the organizations and the activities behind that? Because a map only of assets and use points is kind of meaningless, but once we go towards commodity chains and displaying the interactions between the diverse entities that we are trying to map, coming from 150 plus maps, we'd have to build on the work that you are doing there. So my question is basically, where to start, to get this algorithmic representation of the flows of any kind that lie behind. So, because the problem is, maybe I give a little explanation of the organized networks theory. He builds up a dialectic picture between networked organizations, which refer to states, academia, and big corporations, which embody hierarchical means of organization, of social organization. So personnel can easily flow or exchange work between one of the other three types. So if I'm in academia and have to work with someone in a corporation, I can easily understand their organization model because it refers to the same hierarchical idea. But in opposition, the organized network is this ever-changing, resilient structure that tries to have vertical exchange of power even. So yeah, I don't know where to cut the line in the modeling of a spec here, because I think what's often taken as a critique on Pavlik's work, that he's trying to think everything in JSON LD terms, people say, and you cannot force reality into that, but we have to start somewhere. So the approach might be to yeah, have this minimum model and maybe take patterns. I don't know who's into pattern languages or stuff.
I actually agree with Elf's approach, meaning that if we can manage to actually structure every atom of the system, the organizations, the people, while using a more or less common standard, which tends to be today JSON LD for its interoperability, for its ease of interconnections between the way it describes things. That would be great, and the dynamic of building the commons is actually based on that, and the fact that if for example, if we manage to we don't necessarily need to all agree on the same common standard, but at least have something that we can share. The idea is to also build commonly and make a real constructive dynamic, where building a person, for example, just simply that, can be read by our platform or your platform or anybody else's platform, and we can have that running fairly quickly, actually. And the same thing goes for organizations. And on the Human Pixel project, we're trying to link that to the way a city works. And for us, the person, of course, is the first and the main brick for each network, and each person creates its own network. So it's actually a quite basic social network, but it's fully applied to your citizenship and to your position within your city, and it's oriented to get your organizations or your dynamics more to let them communicate and interact more. Let's say I'm connected to many organizations like NGOs or companies. We have we'd have a directory that isn't something that people would pay for because they paid the value of being in the directory, but they're in the directory because anybody put them in there, and the value comes from usage. So if they're on the top of the directory, it's because a lot of people are using them. And these kind of descriptions of functionalities come in and make the system live and interact between the citizens and all the entities of the city. So we've got this citizen toolkit, which is an API that helps build these projects over the citizen toolkit. So we build network mapping. Let's say I can show you. Yeah, I have to push all this to the server, but everything is still under still working on. So, but the idea is to, of these discussions anyway, is to try and find a collaborative dynamic between all our projects. And it starts actually by very basic building blocks which are based on JSON-LD. And while building commons, I think that's a way we can go, yeah.
So, Elf, if you have to leave, would it be good for you to talk?
Yes, I'll maybe just try to clarify a few things that I got the impression could have gotten a bit blurry. So one, to have the distinction like how in linked data, let's say, ways things work, that we have this RDF, which is conceptual model. JSON-LD is just one of the possible serializations. You can serialize the graph, so it's actually directed labeled graph, RDF. And one of the nowadays most popular serializations is JSON-LD, since most people like to use JSON for their APIs, web apps in JavaScript, and so on. So that makes it a nice fit. So there's one thing, like, you can try to structure information as some kind of key value pairs or some relational models, or you can structure it as graph, and one of the graphs are RDF. You can also have like property graphs and so on, but that's just one of the models of one of the ways of modeling data. It has different serializations, and then also you can use different vocabularies to create some kind of schemas or ontologies. And then so also it's like, if you decide to use something, it's not it doesn't mean that you have to use the whole stack. For example, if you want to use RDF, you don't have to use something like schema.org and so on. So myself, I find it quite useful to actually use this RDF model because it's quite well established and there's lots of tools built around it, lots of understanding, lots of community around this particular way of modeling data. The other one, there are different vocabularies and ontologies, which one can find something useful, or one may want to define a different one. But still, while using RDF, it makes it much simpler to work with different vocabularies because you already have like one quite consistent and formal way of modeling your data. What's also, I think sometimes it's not obvious. I was just talking with Tip some weeks ago, or like 1 or 2 weeks ago, that you can use certain vocabulary to the point that it fits you, and then start extending it with mixing with some other vocabularies. So it's not that you are limited, like often in like relational databases or somewhere you seem to be limited with one schema and you cannot use something outside of it. With RDF, actually, the properties of predicates define which things can be subjects and objects for them if you use, for example, RDF schema. So yeah, so you can use pretty much almost all properties from all vocabularies with all types of subjects and objects. So you have big flexibility of just picking up 6 different vocabularies and use different terms from them in way that fits your needs. And what you can start doing right away, that instead of using your kind of completely your own model that doesn't fit anything in your database, whatever you use, if it's document-based database or relational database, you can already start using the RDF model and just start creating your own vocabularies, which doesn't have to be very formal or very well published, but at least the terms you use your eyes, and you just give it your namespace that you control and some kind of terms that you want to use, that you would use anyhow for your property names, but they become full URIs, and then you can start using the parts of vocabulary that you start designing together with other existing vocabularies. So, okay, so I'm trying to, I mean, OWL will not get too deep in OWL because I must admit I'm still like not too comfortable with all the details about it. Like RDF schema seems much more simple, and also schema.org is usually pretty much using RDF schema sort of variant with some more flexibilities. But just try to say that if you use RDF, you still can stay quite flexible vocabularies, and later you can, for example, using OWL, even without migrating data, make an alignment that your quad store will know that if someone says something with these terms is sort of equivalent property for terms in other vocabulary, so you can start reasoning like it would not matter which term from which vocabulary you use. So some like lighter clients often will struggle with that. So that's often where people say the difference between, one of the differences between linked data and semantic web, that linked data tries to keep it a bit more simple, but all those kind of OWL, reasoning, inference, that gets more into semantic web, which is a bit more kind of advanced and complex topics. But I try to emphasize that it's not like all or nothing, that you buy into everything, or you just have to completely your own thing, you know, like without taking parts of the existing models. You can still like do a lot with RDF and then still flexible in vocabulary. So I don't know if I made it any more clear, but it's not just all or nothing. There are a few different concerns here which you can like cherry pick and reuse as much as you want from all of them. Okay, I think I'm done here.
We don't really. It's true that in our level of describing objects and usage, we're much more in RDF and JSON-LD, which are very equivalent on the same level, than OWL, that is very structuring languages issue. It's not really something we're going to be using here, because we're trying to represent things and get things interacting, and the OWL part is more about structuring and creating new languages.
Mm-hmm. Also, you can use it to align two different vocabularies. So if you have two different vocabularies which work with the same domain, you can use statements using OWL to align them, and then your data store, your quad store or triple store will have more ease, like speaking two different languages. It will not matter what's the vocabulary of the data, because you can align them in an interesting way. But that requires more sophisticated databases to do that. They exist, but not everyone can use them everywhere. So that's, again, a trade-off. If you want to use the whole kind of like a toolkit, or you want to just make things a bit more simplified, but at the same time it's more easy to consume and work with it for more simple clients. But I think I will need to run away now, because the friend have just arrived and he will leave probably in half an hour to go to a different city. I guess
Elf,
maybe. Yep.
It was great having you, and anyway, I think we're gonna try and do this more often, and it'll just be a way of saying, you know, if you want a place to say who's doing what, and if there's any news on what can be what approach can be proposed to Commons. And that's the idea behind these meetups.
Mm-hmm. And there also one thing, that sometimes we try to like get everything conceptually perfect before start doing things, and I would really like that we start doing things while they're still uncertain and blurry, and then as we fail and make mistakes and see that there's something hurtful and painful, try to fix and focus on prioritizing those things. So again, even that we don't have like all perfect clarity how to do all the things, we can already do much more than we do nowadays. So let's find those steps we can actually start doing.
We like do something now.
Yeah, so maybe for the next Hangout we can do a little theme, like what kind of exercise we can do. Maybe we can try to publish profiles in RDF, probably like JSON-LD, with all the projects we work on, or our personal profiles, or start like trying to describe organizations we work with, and like see on ourselves like where we already can reuse existing stuff and where we actually have some kind of limitations that we need to address.
Can we think about
a form so that everybody could fill up and try and start that kind of dynamic, a bit very similar to what you presented, Elf, but we tried it a few times with other projects and it didn't work every time. PLP editor, exactly, and it's I think it's still a bit bugsy, or maybe it just fell on me.
Yeah, Alex also was fixing it a bit, so we should have it like functional probably later the next week. Okay,
brilliant. So maybe that could be a good starting point for everybody to build their own JSON person LD persona, or definition of their person.
John Richter put in PLP editor, people editor, or something like that. That's what I was looking for. People docs. Yeah, I was looking for something. If we could figure out something that we could all work on together, that would be interesting.
Okay, so I need to run. Really great seeing all of you, and I look forward. Maybe if actually there's another date on the doodle, we can just recycle the doodle and schedule this the second date.
Okay,
Ciao.
definitely. That's a good idea.
Ciao.
See you. Bye.
Ahoy. So now
just for the methodologies, the plus Q, it's just a practical way of saying I'd like to go into Q. So it'll be the next talker. So I guess Bob, that's your Q.
Bob.
Bob.
Oh, I already did it. I just thought that I liked Elf's idea of let's do something, and then I was thinking, well, can we come up with something that we can all do together, collaborate on in some way, and maybe that could be one of the topics for the next get together, or maybe even before. That was all.
Sure. Go ahead, Jan.
So for me, there's of course the approach of working on collaborating and iteratively designing. There's a good thing behind it, but I also like the approach that we have taken in discussing the organizational metaphors somehow, because establishing the schema also implies, for me at least, a social structure, how things can be used, and what kind of structurization processes follow up after Giddens, because I have kind of a social science background also. And for me, it is important to evaluate the question of how we are reproducing power structures, or which ways of interactions are actually needed, and how that shapes different kinds of social organization in a broad theme. Because in the ideal way, the schema we find would also apply on, say, networked organizations, but it would extend to more loosely coupled individuals or organizations that collaborate on many projects at the same time. So for us, with the Public Space Invaders research, we found the notion of time, and to represent it, one of the important and hardest questions to answer, to be able to show what happened in the past and how things evolved within an organization or process, and how that influences the decisions that are going to be made in anticipating future work and things like this. Because with the iterative approach, sometimes one loses the broad scope on really designing sustainable models that a bigger group of people agrees on. That's why I linked the open app vocabulary discussion to the data standardization discussion from the mapping of mappings, because I think finding a global consensus on these things, at least between different organizations like Open Knowledge Foundation, NSpiral, Mützo, RICAL, and the others that are working in the field, to take the prototypes out and actually use them. You know, I think time for playing is over, and we're at some kind of tipping point where autonomous self-organization has to prove against state or corporations that it has effects on the world that may be more sustainable for all of us, because it focuses more on local development that is embedded into global processes. But I'm not so clear here. But I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Concerning that point, the approach of our project, the Human Pixel project, it's completely NGO driven, and we really we've been doing the thinking for 2 years now. So now it's more of now we really want to get our hands dirty and stop the talking iteration and really go into the development iterations. It's really we have a new word that we use. It's being communected, and communected is in French. Commune is the city, so it's as if we'd be talking about connected territories with the people at the center, and we realized while exchanging with other projects in France that they had not necessarily the same objectives, but similar bricks inside those objectives that we had in common. So we decided that we would try and build these bricks commonly, and the dynamic started where we defined the objects, so person organizations at first, and project then, but that became some sort of architectural approach, and which actually got us close to the open app approach, when it seems they have exactly the same. So there's a global dynamic who's really working towards setting these common bricks and common cornerstones. We also met with Sensorica and with Bob and Lynn the same way, finding that the dynamic would be really positive. And the objective now is to have a monthly meeting to kind of see what's going on and for everyone to send some feedback. And it's totally it's even more interesting when we can get a real development iteration going as well.
Yeah, agree.
So then we basically need to publish the data in the same RDF schema, serialized as JSON-LD, and then we need client-side scrapers or crawlers that just follow the links. I give it one starting point, and it gives me a network visualization of what's going on, but there's no central database, but I can just walk the graph from one hop to the other.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're building with your network mapping PixelHuman thing?
Right. It's actually a natural kind of network mapping. There's a brick that is network mapping. I could actually show you that. But the idea is really to try and build an open data model of how a city works, and the starting point will be the citizens. And then citizens get together into organizations, and then you get the value process, and then on top of the value you get exchange processes, then you get discussion systems, and whatever we have this whole toolkit that will help us build these tools that will make our cities or our organizations more open, or try and find. We all have this kind of feeling that things are going, but in a pyramidal way, and it's not really going from the bottom up, and it's just stuck there. That everybody is stuck at their own level, and the idea is to try and get the bottom up movement into the pyramid and kind of break it down, and not break it down, but at least get the voice of the bottom to the top, right? Go ahead, Q. Bob. All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something that Tibor said, and also sort of make a statement of personal direction here. If Tibor, if you guys get into the point where you actually, in your city model, if you want to have economic relationships, you know, to have all of that stuff connected, we would be really happy to help. And the statement of personal direction is, I'm an old man, okay? And so one of my goals in life is to work myself out of a programming job. So I would love to see other people pick up on what we have been trying to do and understand it and understand what it can do and do it better. And then we'll help you. Right? That's all.
I promised, Bob, I already promised you last time that the model and the time you spent modeling that out is something that will definitely come in very soon after we have the first layer of this societal network. Because it's not a social network, it's a societal network where the citizen is at the center, and we're gonna have to integrate economical exchanges and there's a lot of projects. Have you heard of Ethereum as well?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
That's quite impressive. They're quite interesting, and there's a lot of these distributed value networks. But I really like the approach of what's going on. But we have to also focus on going step by step. And for the moment, for me, for the project anyway, the economics and the exchange part, it's coming in a second part, in the second step. We have to start getting the network mapping going, and then we can, I think, start going into the exchanges and economy, right?
Yeah. I have looked at Ethereum and a bunch of different things. As being a limited person, I have been focusing, and both of us been focusing on, as the avenues to go, the ways to move forward right now are in these discussions about linked open data and in the Inspiral open apps ecosystem and things like that. And so that's what we're trying to connect up with. We can't go there technically yet because, as I said, we got people that are still depending on our existing code base, but we will help people. You know, we will plug in with people. And then we'll figure out how to migrate into this other technical world as it evolves. On that score, technically, I am skeptical about blockchains. You know, but I mean, that's a little minor things. I'm sure they're wonderful, right?
Yeah, that's basic criticism on the blockchains is that we struggle to understand Bitcoin already, and Ethereum is maybe just 10 years before its time. So I doubt it will have a remarkable role in mainstream economic processes. And what is for me the question is, like, within the MMM, we had the question, what is actually the alternative economy? What is sharing economy? You know, what is commons-based peer production? What is solidary economy? And why do they all try to have different terms expressing their ideas? And then it becomes very human again, that people argue about their ideas, and this is the way how to do it, and this is the way how not to do it, and mine is more social, mine is more environmentally sustainable. So how are we going to model this multiplicity? I don't know, because building a schema already defines a set of possible implications that can be derived from them. And I wonder, maybe that's just not solved technically, or I need OWL for it. Thibaut, maybe you can help me out there, but we will still need to communicate, as we see with the decline of hierarchical organizations. Structure loses and communication raises. So I'm a lot into applications that would, for example, in our cases, allow multi-taxonomy, collaborative multi-taxonomy editing in real time. So and transformation too. So I could paste in a data set, the schema is extracted, and I can map the different fields onto whatever else is in this kind of data portal. And I think
I understand that part, Jon, where you keep it open, and I definitely love the idea. But if we want to travel together, even though we have separate projects, I think it would be great if we could settle on a common standard, like even if it's just a simple person, but a person in the end is not much data, and we could make it grow and make it more complicated, and some people will be more complicated than others. But if we can get those first data sets going, and have people out there connected with their JSON LD, it's like the use cases it's started. The use cases started, and it's the usage that will give this dynamic. If we ourselves start doing it, it'll transmit. We'll be able to create invite someone else, etc., etc., etc.
So personally, the portable linked profiles from ELF are then the starting place somehow, or
yeah,
the minimum schema that have been built for their perspective.
I think that's something extremely easy, and that we can right now we can already start playing with it.
And then integrate this kind of data APIs into different applications, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
so,
the idea... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I would just say we don't need to philosophize too much here, but just keep on track of everyone's work, which is like the network of networks. It's not actually an actor like what an organized network could be, but it's just this overview communication structure that allows jumping some hops to interesting points. So we better build or show the network that we already built by data. So publish the profiles and focus on a reader.
What I can propose very simply, we can do this on a GitHub, and we can make a description of this event with the 4 attendees, and we can link those attendees to their web profile. If you put your JSON LD on your server, and that's already like the first dynamics that'll make it happen. That's very simple. We're all autonomous, and we can make that happen. So if that's okay with you, that would be our first common work process.
So cool. Let's make a repo for this event in the Open App GitHub organization.
Well, actually, I built a repo called Building Commons, and I put ELF's person map there for as an example.
Yeah.
And if we all follow this and just read through it and do almost identical format, you can also try using his PLP editor if it works, because it's not always working. Let me get it for you. they made an interface for it. And
Yeah,
and once
I took half an hour filling it out, and then it just didn't give me anything back.
yeah, exactly. So you can edit directly inside the JSON LD. It's fairly simple JSON format. I think all of us can read it and complete it. And once it's there, we can all commit, either put it on a server, but I will prepare the event map, and we can start from there and see where we can go. What do you think about that?
Elf also prepared another repository back at the WeShare Labs Hacking Day here in Berlin, which I just pasted in the chat, where he wrote many examples. And unfortunately, he used a CoffeeScript JSON representation, but yeah, you can just see the structures he has been thinking on, and he didn't fork that yet back to the Hackers for Peace, but it gives many perspectives on the idea, because he already wrote all this JSON LD by hand to have examples.
Who was this?
Who's who?
Who made the samples? Was that Elf or?
Yes, of course.
Okay, cool, perfect. Well, actually, with Elf, we're trying to build that all these maps about projects and organization, etc. So that's already a dynamic that's good. That's out there.
Cool. So see you next time with JSON LD files, and
exactly.
We pull request the Hangout event JSON LD with our URIs.
Absolutely, and that'll link you to the project, and we can start going from there, I guess, or something like that, if that's an idea. I mean, it's still going to be kind of a test and error, and we'll move from there. How's that?
Cool. So Elf has his first usability test running.
I'm actually filling the organization model with describing this meeting. I mean, the building commons, and then I'm going to fill the events thing, and we'll have a map of the event, the organization, and each of our maps will come and complete the system. Okay?
Okay, agreed.
Okay, good experiment.
Okay, cool. Well,
Okay,
I guess at least, we weren't all here, but we did a little step forward, and we'll try and, I think as Elf said, it's not a bad idea maybe to keep the next date open. That was in the proposal. Otherwise, I will launch another doodle for the next month.
No, it was my idea. I wrote it before him.
Oh, sorry. I'm mixing everything up.
You want credit, don't you, Jan?
No, I'm always overheard because I'm an infrastructure guy, and usually people don't recognize my work, because you don't see it.
Okay, underground people. Well,
So,
the idea is here to recognize everyone's work.
Okay, it was a pleasure meeting every one of you. Also, Lynn, you again.
Well, likewise, yeah.
And I suppose we keep everyone on the radar.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Talk
so
later.
so Lynn offered to capture the group chat and send it out to everybody. I hope that everybody's email address is going to be clear, or maybe we can just post it someplace. And then
Tibor offered after that.
yeah, and then Tibor
I will copy it into the GitHub itself.
Oh,
Okay.
you got it. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And then
everybody can have access to it whenever.
And then if you can summarize the proposal so other people can pick up on it, that would be useful too.
Absolutely, I'll do that.
And then I wonder if we're done.
I think we are.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So talk
Okay.
to you soon, people.
Have
It
a
was
good day.
pleasure. Ciao.
Pleasure.
All right.
See you guys. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you all.
everybody.
Bye-bye.